Well, welcome everybody to your wake-up call. We are reading from the book 100 Ways to Motivate Yourself and Change Your Life Forever by Steve Chandler, and we are on chapter number 21. And the title today is Learn to Lose Your Cool. So let's get started here and just dive in. You can create a self that doesn't care that much about what people think. You can motivate yourself by leaving the painful self-consciousness of high school behind. Now, remember, we talked about that yesterday. Cindy and Tracy did such a great job of nailing down chapter number 20 about high school. And you might remember the guy that missed his belt loop and, oh my gosh, it ruined his life forever. Our tendency is to go so far in the timid, non-assertive direction. It might be a profitable overcorrection to adopt these internal commands. Look bad, take a risk, lose face, be yourself, share yourself with someone, open up, be vulnerable, be human, leave your comfort zone, get honest, experience the fear, and do it anyway. He says, the first time I ever spoke to author and psychotherapist Devers Brandon, it was over the phone, and she agreed to work with me on building my own self-confidence and personal growth. It wasn't long into the phone conversation before she asked me about my voice. I'm very interested in your voice, she said with a tone of curiosity. Hoping she might be ready to give me a compliment, I asked her to explain. Well, she said, it's so lifeless, a real monotone. I wonder why that is. Embarrassed, I had no explanation. This conversation took place long before I became a professional speaker, and it was also long before I ever took any acting lessons. It was long before I learned to sing in my car, too. I was completely unaware and very surprised that it seemed to her that I was coming across with a voice like someone out of Night of the Living Dead. That made me laugh. The truth was that during that period in my life, I was living scared. Things weren't going well for me financially. I had serious health problems in my family, and I had that mildly suicidal feeling that accompanies an increasing sense of powerlessness over one's problems. I now think one way a lot of men hide their fears is by assuming a macho kind of dull indifference. I know that's what I had done. That a psychotherapist could hear it immediately in my voice was unnerving, though. Trying to understand why I covered fear with indifference, I remembered that back in my high school, the cool guys were always the least enthusiastic guys. Excuse me. They spoke in monotones emulating James Dean and Marlon Brando. Brando was the coolest of all. He was so indifferent and unenthusiastic, you couldn't even understand him when he spoke. One of the first homework assignments Devers Brandon gave me was to watch Gone with the Wind and study how fearlessly Clark Gable revealed his female side. This sounded weird to me. Gable, a female? I knew Gable was always considered a true man's man in all those old movies, so I couldn't understand what Devers was talking about or how it would help me. When I watched the movie, it became strangely clear. Clark Gable allowed himself such a huge emotional range of expression that I could actually identify scenes in which he was revealing a distinctly female side to his character's personality. Did it make him less manly? No. It made him more real and more compelling. From that time on, I lost my desire to hide myself behind an indifferent, monotonous person. I committed myself to get on the road to creating a self that included a wider range of expression without a nervous preoccupation with coming off like a man's man. I also started noticing how much we seem to love vulnerability in others, but we don't trust it in ourselves. But we can learn to trust it. Just a little at first. Then we can build that vulnerability until we're not afraid to open up into an ever-widening spectrum of self-revelation. By losing face, we connect to the real excitement of life. And what if I don't always come off as an indifferent man's man? Frankly, my dear, I don't give a darn.
All right. So I love it. I love it. So many things that were running through my head, and such a great chapter. And I think this, number one thing that comes through my mind is, Holly does this so well, right? Even on the phone, like you can feel her energy, and, she always just kind of lights up a room, smiles through the phone, even in every conversation. And so she does that so well. And also I think, many times, because I love my wife and we've been married coming on 25 years, I'll hear people say something like, well, I'm not like Holly. And I'll say, well, that's your fault that you're monotone and you're boring, right? So it's just like this. People will tell on themselves and say, well, it's not about being like someone else. It's about not being afraid just to be yourself. And, as he's talking about man's man and all of that, and, feminine side, which I don't agree with, feminine side, I just believe that, Jesus was the ultimate man's man, and Jesus wept, right? He had compassion. He felt for others. He cared for others, and he genuinely showed his feelings. And there's not another man's man, more of a man's man than there was the ultimate in Jesus. And so, I think about this in my own kind of way. And so my dad, he never showed his feelings. He was just, never seen him cry or anything. He would always just kind of be very indifferent. And, it came off as, he always said it was just being, tough and being manly. And although I really totally disagree with that, in so many ways, I would say it's more cowardly than it is manly, because it's just authenticity, right? It's unauthentic, right, to not be yourself. So what I mean by that is I watched my grandma. She was very close to me. She really was kind of my person, and raised me and all of that. And she passed away. And my grandpa was the same way too. He was really, because he never showed his emotions. And so when my grandma passed away, cancer took her. She fought it for a very long time, but she passed away actually when my grandpa was in the hospital having open heart surgery. And so he never really got to say goodbye to her or anything like that. And so, it totally changed him. Right. And ever since then, gosh, he would kind of get, like weepy at just everything. And I remember that personally, because I remember watching, I took care of my grandma. It was on my spring break that all of that happened. And I was the only one that was there, took care of her, and it was, it took care of her as she was really suffering, and when she passed away on a Friday. But it was a really rough time. But I watched everyone not show up. I mean, I really genuinely did it all by myself. One of my cousins stopped by for just one day of 7 days, but nobody really, they just kind of were indifferent about it, and no one, shared their feelings. No one kind of, said goodbye or kind of whatever. And when I lost my grandma, I can remember just thinking, I was a sophomore in college, and just thinking that I was never going to go through my life from that point forward and not just let people know how I felt about them, right? Genuinely, just openly, if I love people, I'm going to let them know, because I watched everyone really suffer after that, because they didn't show their feelings. They didn't say, man, how much I appreciate you, or I loved you, or they didn't even say I love you. And my dad was one of those people. He ended up just kind of up and leaving, disappeared, because of that, and so many things, right, that happened in my family. But it was a decision I made from that point forward, and I wasn't even on a faith walk. Faith wasn't involved in my family. But then, coming to, accepting Jesus in my heart and all of that completely changed. And, it's always Jesus' example, right? Back to what he did. He wept, he cared, he showed compassion. And, it's not to say, hey, what's, I'm the judge, jury, executioner. I got it all figured out. But I think, man, what a terrible life to go through life and not just live passionate about your life, not just be authentic, be yourself, and just genuinely live life with a passion and also, loving people. And I've watched Holli do that, and so we do everything super passionately. It's our life. It's what we do. We attack life passionately. Attack each other passionately, good and bad. So, but living, authentically and just genuinely. I've never watched anybody like Holly just truly love people, right? Just love everyone. It's what Jesus calls us to do, to love everyone, right? And so there's so much about this, like when you kind of step back and look at it, and it just starts to become into stereotypes, and stereotypes are just that. They're never any good, whether it's about kind of, hey, this is a stereotype about this or that. The one thing we should look to is the example that Jesus gives us of what it looks like to really love and to be authentic and to be ourselves. And God made us perfect, each and every one of us. So that's in our kind of imperfections. That's where He shows up and does amazing things. And so we all know those stories about those people, whether it be in the Bible or whether it be in life. But why can't one of those stories be about you if you're willing to just kind of be yourself, be open, live authentically, be passionate about something? And before I turn over to Holly, my last thing, I always think just, the majority of people go through life that way, really indifferent and not really taking a stand for anything, kind of going with the flow. And, I think only dead fish go with the flow, but also, what God gives us this life, and what we do with it is our gift back. And, just throw yourself completely at something, anything, right? I mean, and first and foremost, for me, with Father's Day coming up, being a father, number one, being a good father means being a good husband. So it starts there, being a good example of what it looks like. But, just, simply, it's like, it's the one thing that if I say, hey, what'd you throw yourself completely at? It's like my family. Like my family is above all. And I love this, passionately being a father, being a husband, my kids, my wife, and then loving others. So anyways, throw yourself at something and just with no regrets, right? No inhibitions. And most people go through life and they never, ever do that.
I love that. What a good take on this chapter, Jamie. And, I have watched you live this out, and I love the title of the chapter, Lose Your Cool. I was sitting here, listening to Jamie, and I think everyone on this phone, someone that has this cool persona, right? Like they are just walking around like they're all that it's chips. And, they just are just like, kind of like this facade. And, I know they talked about in the chapter, the movie stars James Dean and Marlon Brando. Well, that was a facade in a movie, right? Like they were playing characters that were just, cooler than cool, and you don't show your emotions and all of that stuff. And it's crucial that we lose cool in this way, because that's what makes us real. That's what makes us vulnerable. That's what will attract other real people to your life. And I don't know about you all, but I want real friends. I don't want fake friends, And I remember when, Jamie and I first started dating, and really we kind of knew, you just know that the one thing that I was so attracted to about Jamie was he was not afraid to lose his cool. I knew exactly how he felt about me. I knew how he felt about his family. I knew how he felt about his friends. I watched him every time, it was usually on the basketball court. We'd be getting ready to leave, the game or a pickup game. He'd always have his friends tell him that, he loved them. And I just was like, wow, like it was just an instant connection, because that's kind of how I tried to live my life too. And I never met another man that was really living that out like Jamie did. And I was just so attracted by that, not because he was cool, he was cool in his own way to me, but not because he was cool walking around like he's all that in a bag of chips, because he was willing to be vulnerable and let everyone around him know exactly how he felt about them. And I think that that's so important. And the one thing I know about Jamie, he is not, there's not a fake bone in his body. And I'll leave you with this, and it's funny. And no, we don't condone violence, so just take this with a grain of salt. I remember Jamie and I were talking with someone, and you know, Jamie was getting really emotional, and he was sharing some of his heart and some of his story. And I remember there was some men that were like, "Oh my gosh, you know, don't cry," and they, you know, kind of don't, you know, do that. And then I can't even remember what they said. It was like some kind of a joke about there are onions in the room or something like that. And it was getting a little bit much. And I was thinking, man, I hope these guys know what they're doing here by saying this stuff. And I remember, you know, Jamie basically saying as we walked away, it wouldn't have been so funny if that cool guy would have got beat up by a guy that was crying. And I remember just laughing to myself thinking, oh, man, well, that's true. So just something funny to leave you all with. No, we don't condone violence, but we just wanted to say thank you for joining us. I'll be back tomorrow for another wake-up call. I hope you're continuing to join and listen in. And like Jamie had mentioned, Father's Day is Sunday, so we just want to say Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. We love you all. Jamie will unmute the lines, and we'll say goodbye to one another.
All right, here we go.